Good evening again, and welcome to Wesley United Methodist Church and these Divas and Darlings of the Bible tell their stories. We're excited to have you here. Just a word of welcome. In addition, also announcements. Make sure your phones are off or silenced, just to help keep everyone focused and to not have interruptions of phone calls. So make sure your phones are silenced or off. Also, probably best if you don't use flash photography. If you take any photos, it can be startling to the women telling their stories. So those two notes, and also if you need a restroom during the performance, we do have two in the building. If you go up the stairs in the back, on the back walls, there's a restroom in each of those classrooms. So if you need a restroom, you can go upstairs, or of course, the ones across the kind of garden area. The other thing I get the joy of doing is talking a little bit about the mission. This evening is all about thee. We are supporting Bahamas relief post the Hurricane Dorian kind of just directly hit the Bahamas, and just intense devastation there. So this evening was kind of dreamed up to see what we could do to help support the relief work there. And the donations will all go through UMCOR, which is a mission that's a part of the United Methodist Church. Stands for United Methodist Committee on Relief, and they're the disaster relief branch of kind of Methodist mission work, and all of the money that is given to UMCOR goes directly to disaster relief. There's none lost in overhead, so it's an incredible way for us to really make the most impact with the money we give. So all of the money from the ticket sales and the dinner, it's all going directly to hurricane relief. And I think if anyone would like to make any donations to that relief, there's also, if you want to make any donations on your way out, generally have a small box. But we're really excited for this evening of being together, seeing the Bible come alive through story, and also using that to give back and to help our brothers and sisters in the Bahamas. So once again, welcome, and I hope you all enjoy our performance tonight.
Good evening, and welcome to Wesley United Methodist Church production of Divas and Darlings of the Bible. Tonight, we will hear from several women of the Old Testament. First is Michal. In her, we see that, life is complicated. Even if you're born to royalty, marry the man of your dreams, life may not be so easy.
My name is Michal. I'm the younger daughter of Saul, the first anointed king of United Israel. You may think that as a princess of Israel, I led a charmed life. Well, the opposite is true. After my father lost God's favor because of his disobedience, he became very troubled, and only the soothing music of a young shepherd boy named David could soothe his troubled soul. Although quite young, David also became the armor bearer for my father and accompanied him into battle. I was very young at that time. I didn't pay too much attention to David until that day that my father's armies had gone into battle with the Philistines. And they had a champion named Goliath, a huge man, a giant, who marched up and down and called for Saul to produce a hero to do one-to-one battle. Well, nobody wanted to fight that giant. But David, just a lad, refusing all armor and refusing all weapons, went up against Goliath, and he knocked down that giant with just a single stone from a shepherd's sling to the forehead. David ran out, grabbed Goliath's own sword, and cut off his head. Well, the people had a new hero. But my father was a little jealous of all the attention. Nevertheless, as David grew into manhood, my father gave him more and more responsibility, even to the point of leading his armies. David was very fierce and an excellent leader, and his victories mounted up and up and up. And the more victories he got, the more praise from the people, the more jealous Saul got, and began to see David as a rival for his throne. It wasn't just the people who were falling in love with David. There was no one as handsome, as beautiful with his music, and as fierce and brave in battle as David. I fell completely in love with him, and I was crushed when my older sister, Merab, was offered to David as a bride in order to seal David's loyalty to my father. But my father changed his mind and married Merab off to an ally instead. I was thrilled when he offered my hand in marriage to David, until I discovered that Saul was actually plotting against David by giving a bride price of 100 Philistine foreskins. Well, which was a task guaranteed to get David killed. Well, when David presented him with 200 foreskins, Saul was forced to live up to the agreement, and we were soon married. And it was the happiest day of my life. Well, it wasn't just the people who loved David, as I said before. I was so totally in love. I would have done anything for him. And my brother Jonathan also became David's best friend. But Saul's moods got worse and worse, and his jealousy got worse and worse. In fact, twice he threw a spear at my David, almost killed him. The first time it happened, Jonathan intervened for him, and David was able to return to court. But things did not get any better. The second time, Saul threw a spear at my David. David ran home, and I hid him, and then I helped him escape by lowering him out the back window with a rope. And he was big. Well, I delayed the soldiers. I really wanted to go with David, though, but I stayed behind, and I made up a fake David underneath the bedclothes, and I told the soldiers that he was sick and showed him the bed. Fooled him for a little while, but by the time they figured out the ruse, David was long gone and he was safe. Well, my father was furious with me when he found out I helped David. So I lied, and I said, "Daddy," he said he'd kill me if I didn't help him escape. So I got to live. And I waited for my loving husband that I loved so much to send for me, come get me, and I waited, and I waited. He didn't come. My father, whether to punish me or to spite David or maybe both, decided to marry me off to another man, Patiel from Gilead. I was already married. But in Saul's eyes, this illegal marriage would eliminate any claim that David might have to Saul's throne. Well, in the eyes of God, that would have been adultery. Patiel, he was a righteous man. He was a good man. Because he was righteous, we never consummated our marriage. But he was a good, loving man, and he took good care of me, and he was a wonderful husband. And over the time I was with him, I began to love him back. The years passed. David did not come for me. I heard that he married other women. I came to the realization that although I loved him so much and I would have died for him, I risked my own life for him. He did not feel the same way about me. Well, there was a terrible battle, once again with the Philistines. And my father, Jonathan, and another of my brothers were all killed in the terrible battle. Abner, the commander of my father's forces, he appointed my one remaining brother, Ishbosheth, to be the king of Israel. While all this was going on, David had become famous as a mercenary and had actually gotten himself proclaimed as king of Judah. Things continued for a while like that, but then Ishbosheth insulted Abner. Not a good idea. And they had a terrible argument. David heard about it, contacted Abner, tried to get him to defect and to bring forces and bring Israel and get David proclaimed king of Israel as well. Well, Abner was loyal to my family. And what does he say? He would do it, but only if David took me back as queen. Here I am, happy with Tatiel. That I get taken from the one man who truly loved me to be delivered to David. Tatiel followed behind, crying and begging until Abner got fed up and he started to run off after him and told him to go home. So I was delivered to David. I knew because David never came for me himself. I was just a pawn, a political pawn, just like I was for my father. Separated from the one man that I loved. And now my sister is also dead. Then, although David said he had nothing to do with it there, right? My brother Ishbosheth was assassinated, murdered in his bed. So, David became king of Israel also. Well, with all my family gone, I felt terribly alone, and I became very bitter. And the bitterness grew until I could contain it no longer. On that day, when I pretty much lost it, David decided to bring the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. And as I watched from my upstairs window, what do I see? David is leading the procession with the Ark of the Covenant behind him, and he's dancing and whirling around very nearly naked. I was so humiliated that the king would behave in such a way in front of the whole crowd along the road. Well, I was waiting for him when he came home. I stood in the doorway where he could not even walk in his front door, and I let him have it between the eyes. I told him then how disrespectful it was and how horrible it was that he's dancing around like a crazy person in public, exposing himself to slave girls, humiliating me, disrespecting his wife, whose lineage is what helped give him his kingdom, helped justify him being king. Well, he told me in no uncertain terms that God chose him over my father, and that he would debase himself as much as he wanted to, and that among the slave girls, and I quote, among the slave girls he would be honored. Well, basically he told me that he would rather have the sexual admiration of a bunch of slave girls than the respect of his wife, his queen. Well, the scribes finished my story as, and the daughter of Saul, Nia, would remain to her dying day childless. And to a Jewish woman, that was the ultimate insult. To be barren was considered a curse from God. Well, as far as I'm concerned, my story did not end there. I may not have had any children from my 2 husbands, but when my sister died, I took her 5 sons and I raised them as my own. I may not have been a mother in that sense, but I was a mother of my nephews, and I'm still queen.
Next up, we'll hear from Deborah, a woman who rose up from oppression to save her people.
I'm Deborah. This is an excerpt from the Song of Deborah from Judges 5. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were deserted, and the travelers walked along the byways. Village life ceased. It ceased in Israel until I, Deborah, arose in Israel, arose a mother in Israel. I am Deborah, the only judge ever to be chosen who was a female. I was both a judge and a prophet of God. I lived in very difficult times. Many of the people of Israel had turned to pagan idols. And as a result, God had allowed King Jabin of Hazor, a nearby country, to conquer us and overtake our people. And we were sorely persecuted every day. Life was miserable in Israel. But this was the time that I lived in. It was the time of Judges, which started in the time of Moses, for there were too many things to do for one man to do, and so he said, one shall be appointed a judge to make decisions about who is right and who is wrong and enforce our ordinances. In effect, the judges ruled the country of Israel, though they were not kings or queens. I was the 4th judge out of 12 before Israel finally received a king. I was also a prophet of God. Maybe that was why I was chosen. I don't know. I spoke boldly among the people. I told God's truth. I prophesied. I prophesied of the truth of today and the truth that would come tomorrow. I led worship services, and people often came to me and asked me questions about what should I do about this, what should I do about that, and so it was not so unusual that I was chosen to be a judge, I guess. As a judge, I would go down to a certain palm tree in a central area, and every day people would come from the east and the west and the north and the south, and they would line up and they would bring their problems to me. It was a difficult job, and people said I had a fiery temperament, but I think that I did it wisely, because when a problem was brought to me, I thought about it, I meditated upon it, and I prayed and prayed until God told me what I should do, and that I would tell the people. And so the people respected me, and they knew that I would not lead them down the wrong path. As a judge, I was also responsible for the safety of my country. And even though we had been oppressed for 20 years, one night God revealed to me that we should pull our military together and attack King Jabin's forces, who were led by General Sisera. And so I called my second in command. His name was Barak. And when Barak came to me, I said, put together 10,000 forces and take them near Mount Tabor, where General Sisera's forces are massing, and attack them. And God has told me that we will overcome them. And Barak looked at me and he said, I will not go unless you go with me. I don't really know why he said that. Maybe it was because he wanted the security of having a prophet of God along with him in the battle. Or maybe he didn't really want to be led into battle by a woman, and he thought if I said that he wouldn't have to attack them. But I replied, I prophesy, I will go with you, but if I do, God will deliver the glory of the battle into the hands of a woman. Well, I went with Barak, and there was a massive battle, and the fields were wet, and General Sisera's forces had these carts with iron wheels, and they bogged down in the mud, and Barak's forces were able to pick off every single one of them. But General Sisera himself escaped. He ran away to a Kenite village, and there he enlisted the aid of the wife of the leader there. Her name was Jael, but she was not really inclined to help him. She only pretended. She hid him in her tent, and when he asked for water, she brought him milk and curds, and he ate and was full, and he said to her, I'm tired now. Watch the door so no one will bother me while I sleep. And she waited till he was fully asleep. And then she got a tent peg and a wooden mallet, and boom, put a peg right in his head and killed him. So Jael got the glory of the victory over the forces of General Sisera. We all celebrated. It was a wonderful time. And I wrote the Song of Deborah, which you can find in Judges 5, which details every part of that. And after that, because we had been released from bondage that we had been under for so long, we had 40 years of peace and prosperity after that. And I was remembered as a wise judge, a prophet of God, a military strategist, and a poet. Not a bad way to be remembered.
Our next story comes from Shipra, a wise woman with the hands of a healer who risked her own life to save others. In her story, we see that often in times of adversity, a hero emerges from within.
I'm Shipra. You probably don't know my name, but for many years I was a midwife to the Hebrew people when they were exiled into Egypt. My friend Pua and I delivered all the Israelite babies. Being a midwife was all I ever wanted to do. Now, when we were young, Pua and I were apprenticed to an older midwife, and we watched, we looked, and we listened, and we learned. And when we were ready, we were able to do some of the duties of a midwife, midwifery duties. We were able to do many things. For instance, we were able to comfort the mothers when they were in labor. We were able to use the birthing stool and how to wash and swaddle the babies when they were ready to be presented to the mothers. Pooh and I delivered them all. We delivered them all. And oh, the sound of those newborn babies' cries were like music to my ears. However, being a midwife, one knows that things can go wrong very quickly. Like that, things can go wrong and you have to be prepared for anything. But nothing would have prepared us for the day when, quite out of the blue, we were summoned before the Pharaoh. Pooh and I were trembling and we bowed down and our whole bodies were shaking in front of the Pharaoh. And he looked down at us and he said, "Are you the women, the midwives, who helped to birth the Hebrew babies?" And we said, "Yes, Your Majesty, yes, we are." And then he ordered us to do the most evil act possible. He said, "When you deliver a Hebrew baby, you must kill all the baby boys as they are being born, so that the mothers will not know what has happened. Do you understand me? You must kill all the baby boys. Do you understand?" Pooh and I were aghast. We were aghast. But we bowed our heads and we said, "Yes, yes, 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 Your Majesty, yes, yes, we understand." But Pooh and I feared God more than we feared the Pharaoh. We delivered all the babies, all the Hebrew babies, boys and girls, with the same care and love that we had always shown. But alas, Pharaoh's spies began to notice that there were indeed many little Hebrew boys running around. So we were once again dragged before him in the palace. He was furious. He said, "Did I not tell you to kill all the male Hebrew babies? There are more now than there were before." Now, Pooh and I had discussed the possibility that we would be dragged before him again. So we knew that the Egyptians looked down upon the Hebrews. In fact, they hardly thought the Hebrews were human at all. So I said to the Pharaoh, "Your Majesty, the Hebrew women aren't like our Egyptian women. They're so vigorous that the babies just come before we get there, and there's nothing we can do." And the Pharaoh looked at us and he said, "Very well. I see. You may go." I wish that were the end of my story, but alas, it is not. But some time later, Pharaoh sent his soldiers out among the homes of the Hebrews, and he removed the little Hebrew baby boys from their families. They removed them, and they took them down to the river Nile, and they threw them in. Now, some little baby boys survived. One of them was a little one who was found and given the name of Moses. And later on, he became a great leader for his people.
Our next story comes from Bathsheba, and we see in her life that our actions truly do have consequences.
I am Bathsheba, and once I was the wife of the Hittite Uriah. Uriah was a soldier. He was a good soldier, a loyal soldier, one of the so-called mighty men whom the king relied on. Because of Uriah's status, our home was very near the king's palace. Late one night, when Uriah was away at war with the Ammonites, I had my servant set up my ritual bath on the rooftop. Because it was so late, I was sure that no one would be awake. I could not know that King David had awakened in the night and unable to fall back asleep, was walking about on his rooftop. And he saw me, nude, bathing. He sent messengers to find out who I was, so he knew that I was married to Uriah. That fact would have stopped most men. But David was not like most men. The next day, messengers came for me to go to the palace. I was confused. I had no idea why the king would want to see me. But what do? You don't say, "Oh, please tell the king thank you very much for his kind invitation, but I have other plans." No. You put on your finest robes and you go. I was apprehensive. I was even frightened. But David allayed my fears. David was charismatic. David was handsome. And he entertained me with sumptuous platters of food and the best of wines. I didn't know why David had called me to the palace, but when I understood finally what he wanted from me, I submitted. I submitted to his desires because it isn't safe to say no to the king. The next morning I went home in shame. Although I had not intended to be unfaithful to Uriah, I was plagued by feelings of guilt. And my torment only increased when I realized later that I was pregnant. I felt panicked. What would Uriah say? What would Uriah do? He would know, of course, that the child was not his. In my panic, I sent a message to the king. David immediately had Uriah taken from the front, brought back to Jerusalem, to the palace. David's thought was that Uriah would come home to me, he would be with me, and then he would think that the child was his. But Uriah never left the palace. He never came to me at all. I could not possibly have imagined that David would conspire to have Uriah killed in battle. When I learned of Uriah's death, I sincerely mourned his passing. When the period of mourning was through, David made me one of his wives, and I gave birth to his son. The Lord was angered by what David had done, but David acted as though everything were perfectly normal. When the prophet Nathan confronted David, he finally understood, and he genuinely repented of his sins of adultery and murder. Nathan told him that the Lord would spare his life, but that our new baby would sicken and die. David fell on the floor. He wept. He fasted for days, hoping to save the child, but our baby did die. David comforted me after the loss of our child. In time, I gave birth to Solomon, who was blessed by the Lord. And ultimately, David and I had 3 other children. But I will always, always grieve for my precious baby who died.
Now we hear the stories of Naomi and Ruth. Through their tale, we find that even in times of terrible tragedy, God reveals his great faithfulness by bringing just the right people into our lives.
I am Naomi, an Israelite. My husband and I and our 2 sons, we lived in Bethlehem of Judah. And life was good. But then one year, a famine came. And let me tell you, I don't care if you were rich or poor, you just couldn't find enough food. So our family decided to leave Bethlehem and go where we might have a better life. We took the long journey to Moab. Now, it was difficult because we were foreigners. It's always difficult to be a foreigner. And the people there, they didn't believe in the one true God. They had so many gods. They didn't know our God. But at least we had survived. Then a tragedy. My husband died, leaving me alone to raise 2 sons in a land where I knew no one. we managed with God's help. It became easier when they grew up. They married 2 Moabite girls, Orpah and Ruth. Now, they were not Jewish, but I have to say that I liked their companionship. I've been lonely for so long. And I taught them everything I could on cooking and how to run a household. And I was looking forward when I would be a grandmother and our family would be blessed again. But then more tragedy. Both my sons died, one right after the other. It was devastating, just devastating. And we lost everything. For it was the law that only a male could inherit property and other possessions. It meant that I or one of my daughter-in-laws would have to marry a close relative of my husband and then have a male child in order to get our possessions. It was too complicated. There just was no way. I didn't even have relatives there. There was just no way we could do it. So we were homeless and penniless. I just didn't know what to do. How to save us? Then I thought, we'll go back to Bethlehem. The famine is over. I have relatives and friends there, and surely they would want to help us. So we left, the 3 of us, on the long journey from Moab to Bethlehem.
I am Ruth. Though I was a Moabite and worshipped a different God, I married into the Jewish family of Naomi. And I was so lucky. I got a wonderful, loving husband, and Naomi treated me like a daughter. She taught me about their people. She taught me about their God. And she told me how to make food that my husband would like. She treated me like a daughter. And I felt closer to her than I ever had to anyone in my life. It was a good time. But then, tragedy struck. My husband and his brother sickened and died, one right after the other. And we were left with only our tears and clothes on our back. We did not know what to do. Naomi thought, we should go back to Bethlehem. I might have family and friends there who could help. And so we set out. But then Naomi had a change of heart. She said, no, you and your sister-in-law Orpah should go back to Moab and be with your own people. And Orpah, with tears, went back to Moab. But I said to Naomi, I will never leave you. I will be part of your people. I will learn to worship your God. I will stay with you. I will never leave you, and when you die, I will be there and I will be buried next to you, for you were the family. And so we went back to Bethlehem. And there were family and friends who would help us. And I began to go out to the fields to glean after the reapers, glean barley for our food. And I went to the field of Boaz. And he let me glean what I wanted. He gave me water. He even gave me lunch. I went back to Naomi and told her what had happened, and she said, oh, that's good. Boaz is a relative of my husband. You keep going to his fields. He will protect you. He is generous. He is prosperous. That's what you should do. And so I did. And then Naomi said, you need to marry again. And you should marry Boaz. I said, what should I do? And she told me. And so I did. That very night, I went to the field. I went to the threshing floor where Boaz was sleeping. And I crept under the blanket next to him. And when he woke up, I said, you were supposed to marry me so that we could have children who were in the line of Naomi and Naomi's husband. First he said, well, that's very flattering, but you really should maybe find someone closer to your own age, to your own people. But he agreed, and we got married. And we had a son. and we named the son Obed. Naomi was so happy to finally have a grandson. The light of life came back into her eyes once again. And Obed grew up, and he became the father of Jesse, who became the father of King David, and the grandfather of Solomon. And so I, Ruth, a Moab, came into the lineage of kings, and in time, of Jesus Christ.
Next, we hear from Esther, an orphan girl who became a queen. Through her story, we see that sometimes God's plans for us are greater than anything we could have imagined or planned for ourselves.
I'm Esther, a Jewish orphan who became a Persian queen. Now, I lived an ordinary life in Susa, the capital, until my parents died. And then my cousin Mordecai took me in as his own, raised me as his own daughter. And then one day, the king decided he wanted a new wife. So he sent his agents out, and they chose me. They chose me. I don't think they knew I was Jewish. I said to my cousin, I can't do this. I know nothing about these people. I don't know their traditions. I don't know what they eat. I'm terrified. This is not something I can do. But Mordecai said, God has chosen you for a reason. Trust in him and trust in your faith in him, and all will be well. So, after a year of training, the crown was placed on my head, and I became the new queen. And Mordecai became a government official. And life was good. In fact, I was so pleased that Mordecai was nearby. He took his position so seriously. He did such a good job. In fact, one time, he heard the guards plotting to assassinate the king and foil their plans. And that was written in the king's record book. And everything was fine. I was adjusting. I felt welcomed until my husband appointed to the prime minister position a man named Haman. Now Haman was an arrogant, foolish man. He decided that being the prime minister came with power, so therefore everyone should bow to him. Well, in our religion, we don't do that because then we are worshiping that person as an idol. So Mordecai never bowed. Never. No matter what Haman did or threatened to do, Haman never bowed. This made Haman so angry, so mad. He finally decided he would take his revenge out on all the Jews. And he went to the king, and he convinced him that all the Jews should be destroyed and all of their land and property taken. And the king agreed. And so a decree was sent out that on February 28th, all the Jews could be killed and all their property could be taken. When I heard that news, I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. So I sent word to Mordecai about it all, and I told him to tell everyone not to come to the palace, not to plead the case for any reason, for surely their life is in danger. But Mordecai sent back a note, and he said, this is what God chose you. This is your purpose, to save our people. Now you must use your position as queen and your influence on the king, and you must save people. And at that moment, I knew I was to save my people. So I fasted 3 days prayed and I prayed and I prayed. And at the end of the third day, I knew exactly what to do. I bathed. I put on my finest robes. And I fearfully entered the king's inner court. Fortunately, he was glad to see me and he welcomed me. And he asked, what did I want? And I said, I would like to invite him to a banquet, he and Haman, tonight, that I would prepare for him. The king liked that, so he agreed. So that night we had a fine feast, music, it was good company. And at the end of that banquet, the king said, all right, so what is this all about? What is it that you want? And I said, if you would be willing to come tomorrow night to a second banquet, I will tell you what this is all about. The king agreed. So that night, Haman went home, had to pass the gates, and sure enough, there was Mordecai, and he didn't bow. Haman was so angry. He went home ranting and raving to his wife again, and she said, enough! I'm tired of this complaining. Kill him! Hang him! Do something else. I'm sick of hearing this. So he did. He built a gallows. He ordered it to be built that night. Now, meanwhile, the king was looking through his record book, and he saw that Mordecai had saved his life, but had never been rewarded. So the next morning, he called for Haman to come to his court. And of course, Haman was very excited about that because he was on his way to ask permission to have Mordecai hanged. But the king said, as soon as Haman arrived, what would you do for a man who has pleased me? And as you know, Haman, in his arrogant, foolish ways, was thinking that the king was speaking about him. So he said, well, I would have that person put on royal robes and a royal horse, ride a royal horse, led by a noble prince, and that he would be paraded through town, and that the prince would announce to everyone as he passed, this is how a man is treated who pleases the king. Well, the king was quite amused by this, and he said, okay, you are to do that today for Mordecai. You can imagine Haman's reaction, but you must have been the king. So, I had such delight looking out my window, watching this parade go down the main street, Mordecai waving, people adoring him, and Haman gritting his teeth. This is how a man is treated who pleases the king. He was humiliated. I loved it. Well, next night, the second banquet, again, we had a lovely feast. And afterwards, the king said, all right, what is this all about? Whatever you want, I will grant it. I will promise you anything you ask. And I said, I would like you to save my life and my people's lives from our enemy. And the king said, who dare touch you? And I pointed to Haman. He would. He is our enemy. That upset the king so much. He jumped up abruptly, went out into the garden to think. Haman saw this, turned to me, and he began to beg for his life. Sniveling, begging, crying. I just ignored him. He got so desperate, he threw himself on the couch where I was sitting, just as my husband was coming in. course, the king thought he was assaulted. So he immediately ordered Haman to be hung in the gallows. On the gallows. Try not to be too amused by that. Hung in the gallows he had built for Mordecai. And I received all of Haman's estate, and Mordecai became the prime minister. And the king asked me, now, are you pleased? And I said, well, I have one more request. And that would be that you would take back the decree that on February 28th, all the Jews could be killed. And the king said, no, I cannot take back that decree. It is against the law. It's very sad. I began to pray quietly to myself. I really didn't know what else to do. And then the king, seeing my distress, he took my hands and he said, but I can do something else. I can send out a decree that the Jews may band together and defend themselves. And every enemy they kill, they can take their property. And so, on February 28th, for many days, our city was at war. But the Jews prevailed, and they beat, killed many of their enemies, and took many properties. And this is how the Jews were saved and prospered. And to this day, we celebrate this deliverance of the Jews with a festival, parties, and dinners, and sharing, giving gifts to the poor, and adding additions to our daily prayers. Some have costumes and masks, and we make very special pastry called hamantash, and it means Haman's ear. We call this the Festival of Purim.
Finally, we hear from one of the true villains of the Bible, Jezebel. Horrid woman. Even to this day, anyone would be out of their mind to name their daughter Jezebel. But she was proud, wicked, and dangerous. But in the end, she ends up going to the dogs.
I'm Jezebel. You look at me with disdain. It is now as it ever has been. Nevertheless, I was born a princess of Phoenicia and a worshiper of Baal and Asherah. My father, the king of Phoenicia, indulged me in everything growing up. And when I grew to be of a marriageable age, King Ahab from Israel came, from the Israelites, and he wanted a wife and he wanted a political alliance with my father, and so he obliged him and he made the alliance and he gave me to King Ahab to wed. You might think that wouldn't make such a good match to be the product of a political alliance, but Ahab was quite taken with me, and he was a weak man, and I could see that I could get just about anything I wanted from him. I could twist him around my little finger. And so when we left to go to Israel, as one does in a political alliance, he dutifully built me a temple to Baal and a sacred pole to Asherah, and allowed me to bring a few of my priests and priestesses along with me. But I could see that this was not going to be enough for me. And so I went to my husband one day and I said, I would really like to bring a lot more priests and priestesses to Israel. And he said, whatever you wish, my dear, which is what I always wanted to hear. And so I brought in hundreds of priests and priestesses to Baal and Asheroth and started building temples here and there and everywhere. And for some reason, the people of Israel just grew up in arms, and I think it was largely to do with this prophet Elijah. He was such a pest. Always there, buzzing around in your face like a bee, stirring up trouble, talking about me behind my back. How unseemly to be talking about your queen that way. He called me a witch. He called me an evil priestess. And, well, what if I was? It was only because I wanted to cleanse Israel of their old god and bring in Baal and Asheroth. Well, he just kept on and on and on. He wouldn't let it go as a normal person would. And so, well, he was beginning to make us look ridiculous. And I felt I had to do something. So, as one does in these situations, I asked my husband if I could take care of it. And he said, "Yes, wife, do whatever makes you happy." And so we played a bit of a kind of game of hide and seek, and the soldiers hunted and the prophets hid, and when they found them, poof, no more prophets. I killed as many as I could, but I could not kill them all, and I could not kill Elijah, and that just did not sit well with me. Well, you would think he would lay low for a time after that, but not Elijah. No. He has to challenge my priests and priestesses to some kind of a contest to see who can bring down fire from heaven. And they built two big piles of wood, one on this side, one on this side, and my priest came, and Elijah was there, and they were going to see who could call down fire from heaven. And so they allowed my priests and priestesses to go first, as was only right. And they did all their spells and their enchantments and their dances, and I can't imagine what was wrong. Perhaps they were just not doing the spells correctly, or maybe Baal was not happy that day. I don't know, but it's such an embarrassment. There was no fire. And then it was Elijah's turn, and he was, oh my goodness, he was such a show-off. He wetted down all the wood with water first, and then he prayed, and I don't know how it happened, but fire came down from heaven and burned the wood, and I thought, there must be some trickery involved there. Well, he got the people all stirred up after that, and he said, "Go and kill the priests and priestesses of the false idols," and the people did. They killed 450 of my priests and priestesses. I was enraged when I found out about it. I was just trembling. I was so mad. And I wrote this letter to be sent to him, and it just said, "You're as good as dead, Elijah. You will not live another day." And I sent my soldiers after him, and once again, somehow that man escaped. I don't know how. I don't know how. If that wasn't bad enough, then there was the vineyard incident. Well, we had this beautiful secondary palace in Jezreel, a very lovely place, and it backed up to this very nice vineyard owned by a man named Divas. And my husband Ahab had been looking at that. He said, "Oh, wouldn't it be nice if we could just buy that vineyard and it would be part of the palace gardens? Wouldn't that be nice?" I said, "Well, go and do it." And so he went to Jezreel, and he took bags and bags of money, and he went to Naboth, and he said, "I would like to buy your vineyard." And Naboth said, "No." He said, "But look, I have all this gold here. I will give you all of it. And I will go get some more if you like, and I don't want to sell my vineyard." well, I will find you another vineyard and give you all this gold. And if you will just let me have this vineyard, because it's near to the palace and it's just so very nice and I'd like to have it. And Naboth said, that vineyard was inherited by me and my family, and it is to be passed down to my children, and I would never sell it to anyone, not even to the king. And Ahab was mad. He walked away, stomping back to his horse. He came back to the palace, and by the time he got there, he was just depressed. And I walked in, and it was about supper time, and Ahab was just laying around, and he wouldn't eat any supper. And I asked him what was the matter, and in kind of a whiny voice, he said, Naboth would not sell me the vineyard. And I looked at him and I thought, my father would never have taken no for an answer. And I looked at my weak husband and I said, would you like me to take care of this? And he said, yes, wife, do whatever makes you happy. And so I arranged that two men might make a statement in a crowded place where everyone could hear that Naboth had defamed both the king and the Israelite God. And either one of those were punishable by death. And for sure, that's what happened. By the next day, both Naboth and his sons were dead. So the next morning I told Ahab, I've taken care of it. You can go and get your vineyard now. And so he rode off, very excited and happy. And he gets to the vineyard. And who is there but that pesky Elijah, who gets right up in his face and calls him a murderer? Does he not know he's speaking to the king? And then he tells Ahab, because of what you have done, you're going to die right here where Naboth's blood is, and the dogs will lick your blood. And Ahab was scared to death. And then he went on and he said, and Jezebel, your wife, she will be killed, and her blood will be spattered on the walls of Jezreel, and the dogs will devour her. Well, if I had been there, I would have laughed in his face, of course. But he came home and very upset, and he actually did repent of what he had done and went about in sackcloth and ashes for a time. I told you he was a weak man. And so he did not actually die the way that Elijah said, but sometime later, he was in war with the Arameans and he was killed. It was a dark day. It was a dark day. But I still had my power because my oldest son rose to be king. And so my life pretty much went along unchanged. I lived in the palace at Jezreel, and I was indulged in every way that I had been before. But sadly, my older son was killed, and then my younger son became the king, and again, things were fine, and I was able to have my will and do what I wanted. But then Jehu, the captain of the guard, who was a worshiper of the Israelite God, killed my younger son, and he was appointed king. And I knew my days were numbered. He would not let me live. But I would not go out like a beggar. I knew he would come to Jezreel to kill me. And so I said, I will go out like a queen. And so I went into my rooms, and I painted my eyes, and I put on my royal vestments and my jewelry, and I put on my finest robes. and I prepared myself. And then I stood in the window of my room, which is at the wall of the palace, and I watched as Jehu and his forces came. And when they did, I did not beg for my life. I ridiculed Jehu. And he called out to my servants, "Throw her out the window." And they did. It's so hard to get good help these days. And such a messy death, so messy. And I was trampled by the horses and my blood spattered on the wall, and to make a bad thing worse, Jehu did not have to pick up my body. He went into the palace and he ordered that they prepare a fine meal and he had supper. And when he finished, he ordered them to come gather up my body. But some time had passed and dogs got there first, unfortunately. Such an unseemly thing, such an unseemly way to treat your queen. Well, I was disappointed to find out in death that Baal and Asheroth were of no more use to me than the metal of their idols. It's a disappointing thing to find out that at the end of your life that you have wasted it all. But nevertheless, I am Jezebel, and I will be remembered.
All right, let's ask all of our performers tonight to come back and take a bow.